Hi everybody, sorry I haven't made a video in a while. So today I'm going to be demoing a sort of a spatial grammar system that I've implemented in Unity. And so the goal here is to get sort of randomly, or not randomly, but procedurally generated sort of room layouts that just generally like follow certain constraints. So this is a grammar-based approach in that there's everything is sort of like expands. So the main things here are that there are spawn nodes. So, for example, the room spawn. So the room spawn is like sort of the root of the whole thing. So the room spawn generates 4 walls, and then each of those walls then generates things in turn. So one of the walls. So one of the walls is sort of the what is called the kitchen wall, and so because well, we're in a kitchen, so a kitchen needs to have a stove and a fridge, or most do. So we make sure to always in our kitchen space, we make sure to always have a sort of kitchen wall, and a kitchen wall in turn always has some combination of a fridge and a stove. That stove can then in turn have permutations thereupon. So like there's a pot that can be generated in one of these 2 spaces. And so spawn points have 2 things associated with them. They have a what I refer to as a deck. So a deck being sort of like a list of objects that spawn point can generate from. And that also has density, so that is like sort of like its chance of like actually spawning something. So in this case, our stove spawn point has density of 0.5, so there's 50% chance that a pot will generate on one of the spaces. And so in the case of the stove, since there's 2 spawn points, one will sort of check to see, 50% roll a dice, and if it generates a stove, it draws the, sorry, if it generates a pot, it draws that sort of card from the quote-unquote deck, and then when the second spawn point fires, if there was a pot on the first one, there's then no cards left in the deck for it to draw. So this is getting at sort of like scarcity stuff, because, well, for the stove it makes sense to have 2 pots, probably, but for the most part, it makes more sense to have a limited number of things. So, having 5 fridges in a kitchen is sort of strange, and sort of in this case I'm limiting doors to 2, but you can imagine sort of like a range, or maybe even like a maximum of 3, something like that. So decks, are also, or again, lists of objects, and each object can have sort of a maximum number of objects. Let's see. So here we have these sort of the furniture deck, and so these things are spawning from the furniture deck, and furniture deck, so things in a deck can have a maximum, and a maximum of -1 here indicates sort of like no limit, and they can also have a priority. So in the case of the furniture, like this is almost all decorative stuff, so there's no priority things defined here. But the knickknack deck has the sort of clock defined as having priority. So if there is a knickknack in the room, at least one knickknack in the room, it will be the clock. So for room generation purposes, we can use this to sort of like make sure that certain things are always being fulfilled. Certain objects are sort of like key to sort of a game progression. To say like maybe this clock is associated with, an alarm needs to go off. We can make sure that this is always sort of generated in the room. So then we also have, let's do this plant. So within that we have sort of like noise. Actually, no, doesn't have it. There we go. So certain things can like vary within a range. So on top of this, then there's this sort of adjustment script that I'm running. So I think it actually changed this value, but so I define a like sort of like maximum variability range for each dimension, and then at runtime it sort of like does a random damping of that and then sort of moves it. So these furniture points are sort of like at pretty regular. I think they're at like 2 and -2 in space. And then they can vary up to like a half unit in each direction along the wall. And this just gives a little more sort of like noise and variability. This rug is sort of like spinning randomly, which is maybe a little weird, but does the trick. And then plants generally will spin in a random direction. Yeah, so with that I'll just generate a couple more, get a look at it. So yeah, that's kind of how it's working. Next steps are to sort of take this system and then use it to generate like other spaces, and other do things like make sure that things are always like in sort of like valid places, and that's just sort of like tuning stuff. Yeah, otherwise I'm pretty happy with this. I think even just get out of their table. It generates pretty good rooms overall. Some things like maybe make doors only like limit it 1 per wall or something like that, or you can just like limit them to like the centers of walls, so we don't get weird cases like this sort of dresser being blocking the door. But yeah, okay, that's it.